I should have burned the first rose, but I couldn't. Even now, as I write these words, my fingers tremble with the memory of its petals, velvet soft, trembling against my skin, as if they carried the heat of a pulse. That was impossible, of course. Roses do not breathe. They do not sigh when you touch them. And men do not send flowers when they've been in the ground for 6 months. Yet there it was, perched on my windowsill at dawn, its crimson glow bleeding against the pale light. No vase, no note. Just a rose so fresh it looked as though it had been plucked only moments before, dew still clinging to its leaves like tears. I didn't scream. Perhaps I should have. I didn't run to tell anyone, though the village gossips would have loved that, wouldn't they? No, I kept silent. Because some things once spoken lose their sacredness, and others once spoken brand you as mad. Which am I? I'm not sure anymore. When I reached for the rose, I expected a thorn to bite me, a punishment for daring to touch what belonged to the dead. But no blood came. The stem slid into my hand as gently as if it had been placed there by someone who still knew the shape of my grasp. My heart staggered in my chest, my breath caught, and in that fragile second, I could almost believe he had been there with me, just outside the glass, watching, waiting. I pressed the flower to my lips, and for the briefest moment, I could smell him. The faint trace of smoke, rain, and something darker, metallic, like iron. Memory and presence collided until I couldn't separate them. Was I remembering his scent, or had the rose truly carried it across the veil? I should have thrown it away. I should have locked the window, drawn the curtains, whispered a prayer. But grief does strange things, and love does worse. I set the rose in a glass of water, careful as though it might shatter under my gaze. And all day I watched it. Every shadow lengthening across the floor seemed to point to it. Every silence in the house seemed to deepen around it. You must understand, I had sworn to let him rest. I had sworn to let myself heal. That was what the living demanded of me, what friends with pitying eyes murmured at my shoulder. You're young, you'll learn to love again. Time will mend it. Lies. Time doesn't mend, it festers. It preserves the wound until it grows roots inside you. So when that first rose came, it wasn't a wound reopening. It was recognition. It was a heartbeat, echoing across 6 months of silence. Still, I told no one. I kept it as a secret lover, hidden in plain sight. At night I stared at it until sleep dragged me under, and I dreamed of his hands, his voice, the way he once traced circles on my wrist as though sketching a promise. And when I woke, the rose seemed brighter, as if it had fed on the dream itself. Perhaps you think me foolish. Perhaps you think I wanted to believe so badly that I invented it. But I swear to you the petals did not wither, not after a week, not after 2. While all the flowers in the house drooped and browned, that one remained vivid, almost pulsing with color. I began to dread the day it might fade, and yet it didn't. I wonder now if that was his way of reminding me he had never truly left. If you're still listening, if you haven't dismissed me as a widow unraveling her sanity, then maybe you felt it too. That cold kiss of presence when you wake at night, certain you're not alone. That weight of eyes unseen. If so, then you'll understand why I couldn't burn the first rose, why I couldn't let go, because it wasn't just a flower. It was him, and it was only the beginning. I suppose you'll want to know how it began, how a man like him came to claim me so completely, as if every thread of my being had been spun for his hands alone. It wasn't chance, not really. It never felt like chance. It felt like fate, dangerous, deliberate, and far too consuming to resist. It was autumn when I first saw him. The air was brittle with the scent of leaves burning in the fields, and the sky carried that gray weight of storms yet to come. I was walking home alone, my cloak pulled tight, when he appeared on the path as though he'd stepped straight out of the fog itself. He stood tall and still, a figure half shrouded by the dim light, and even before I saw his face, I knew he was watching me, When our eyes met, it was as though he had been waiting for me all along. His gaze did not wander. It pierced, steady and deliberate, and I felt the world narrow until there was only him and the hollow thud of my own heart. "Forgive me," he said at last, his voice low, velvet wrapped around iron. "I didn't mean to startle you." But I wasn't startled. Not truly. I was ensnared. Over the weeks that followed, I learned how he carried himself, always with that quiet intensity, a man who seemed to know the weight of silence better than the comfort of idle talk. Yet when he spoke, it was never wasted. Every word felt carved into me, etched deep where they could not fade. He told stories in fragments, riddles laced with poetry, and though I understood little, I listened with my whole being. One evening, he pressed a rose into my palm, deep red, thorns carefully stripped away. "For you," he whispered, his breath grazing my cheek. "So you'll remember that beauty and pain are never far apart." I laughed nervously, clutching the flower, but I did remember. I still do. There was an intensity to his courtship, as if he knew time was short. He would appear suddenly, vanish without explanation, then return with eyes that glowed like embers, barely contained. Sometimes, when I asked where he had been, his lips curved in a smile that held no comfort. "Some places you cannot follow," he said once, tracing the line of my wrist with his fingertip, lingering over my pulse. "If I ever leave, don't follow me to the dark." I should have been afraid, but his words bound me closer. Perhaps it was his strangeness that kept me, or perhaps it was the way he looked at me, not as though I was flesh and bone, but something more, something eternal. Nights with him blurred into a fever dream. He spoke of longing, of curses whispered in bloodlines, of love stronger than any vow. And then, when I tried to press him, he would kiss me with such desperation that I could not breathe, as if the very act of holding me was his only defense against some terrible fate. He told me once in the hush of midnight, "You're the only thing keeping me tethered here." I asked him what he meant. His eyes shadowed dark pools of sorrow. "Don't ask me," he murmured. "Just love me. That's all I need from you." And so I loved him, recklessly, entirely, the way one loves when reason is already lost. I let myself be devoured, gladly, because what he offered me was more than life had ever given. The certainty of being chosen, the certainty of belonging. If I had known how brief it would be, perhaps I would have begged him to explain. Perhaps I would have demanded the truths hidden behind his cryptic warnings. But I was young in love, and when you are drunk on passion, you think there will always be another night, another chance. I see now that every rose he gave me was a farewell. Every touch, every whispered riddle was his way of preparing me. And yet when he was gone, I wasn't prepared at all. Because how can you prepare to lose the only person who ever looked at you as if your soul had been his all along? If you're still listening, perhaps you'll understand why I didn't turn away when the first rose came to my window after his death. I had already been warned, but I loved him anyway. I would always love him anyway. And maybe that was exactly what he wanted. It happened on a night too still for comfort. The air was heavy, and even the crickets had gone silent, as if the world itself were holding its breath. I remember waiting for him, pacing the narrow room with my hands clasped tight against my chest because he had promised he would come. He always kept his promises until that one. They told me later it was an accident. A carriage gone astray on the cliff road, the driver drunk or the horses spooked. His body was found among the stones, broken in ways I cannot bear to recall. But from the moment the words left their lips, I knew there was something more. Something that did not belong to the realm of ordinary tragedy, the villagers whispered, as villagers always do. They said his family had been cursed for generations, that no man in their bloodline lived to see gray hair. They said he had dabbled in things best left unspoken, that he walked too often by graveyards and returned with eyes darker than before. And though they spoke with wagging tongues, I could not dismiss them entirely. Hadn't he warned me? Hadn't he told me not to follow him into the dark? But none of that mattered when they laid him before me, pale and still, his lips no longer forming riddles or whispers of devotion. I crumpled beside him, gripping his cold hand, and begged him not to keep this promise, the one I could not survive. And yet, even in death, he had the final word. Our love will not end with me. Those were the last words he had spoken to me. The night before, his eyes shining with that strange light that hovered always between tenderness and torment. I thought it was poetry then, a lover's vow spoken beneath the hush of moonlight. But now I wonder if it was a warning, one I refused to hear. The funeral was held 3 days later, under a sky as black as mourning lace. Rain lashed against the church windows. The wind keened like a widow herself, and the mourners huddled in their veils and coats as though the storm might swallow us all. They dressed him in black, of course, though roses were scattered across the coffin in defiance of the bleakness. Roses, his roses, the same crimson bloom he had pressed into my hand, again and again, until I began to think the flower itself belonged to us. They glowed like spilled blood against the polished wood, and I hated them for their beauty, for daring to live when he did not. I stood at the edge of the grave, trembling, drenched by the storm, and when they lowered him down, I swore I felt it, his touch. A brush against my fingers, light as silk, unmistakable. I gasped, clutching my hand as though I could trap the sensation inside my palm. No one else noticed, or if they did, they thought it grief. But I knew he was there. "Do not leave me," I whispered, my voice stolen by the wind, and for a heartbeat, I could have sworn the rain itself answered, cold drops trailing down my neck like phantom kisses. Afterward, the world expected me to return to normal life, to smile weakly, to accept condolences, to move on. But how does one move on from being chosen, from being bound? I walked the rooms of my house like a ghost, waiting for a door to creak, for a shadow to linger too long. And when nothing came, I thought perhaps I had imagined it, that I had only dreamed his touch at the grave. But dreams fade, the feeling remained. I tell you this now because I know what you're thinking. You're thinking I was delusional, that grief had hollowed me out until I filled the emptiness with his presence. Perhaps you're right. But if you've ever lost someone you loved more than life itself, then you'll understand. You'll understand why, when the first rose appeared on my windowsill, I didn't recoil, I didn't scream, I welcomed it. Because in that moment, I remembered the grave. I remembered the brush of his hand, and I knew the truth. He had promised me our love would not end with him, and promises like his are not broken, not even by death. So when you ask me why I didn't run, why I didn't cast the rose aside, the answer is simple. I had already been touched by him once more. I had already felt the grave stir beneath my skin. I had already chosen without even knowing it. And once you choose, there is no turning back. The first rose might have been dismissed as coincidence, a cruel prank, or the desperate hallucination of a grieving woman. But it didn't stop at one. The roses began to multiply, appearing with a rhythm that soon became unbearable in its precision, like the steady beating of a heart against the walls of my house. At first, they came to the windowsill, always at dawn, as though the night itself had placed them there as an offering to the morning. Then bolder, inside the house. I would wake and find one laid carefully across the threshold of my bedroom door, as though it had been set there by hands that knew the shape of my world. Once, I found one across my pillow while I slept. The stem rested beside my cheek, the petals brushing my temple, fragrant and warm as though freshly plucked. Tell me, how does a rose slip into a locked room without breaking the latch? How does it find its way to the hollow curve of a sleeping woman's body without stirring her awake? I never told a soul. How could I? To admit it aloud would make it real in a way I wasn't ready to face. And yet, my silence became its own kind of worship. I began to expect them. Worse, I began to wait for them. The fear came first, of course. The dread of unseen eyes fixed on me while I undressed. The sensation of being observed in the stillness of night. My breath would quicken, my skin prickling with cold awareness. But then, beneath the fear, desire would coil. The kind of desire only grief can sharpen, aching, desperate, too starved to question what it clings to. And then the notes began. Slips of paper folded with care, ink scrawled in the hand I knew too well. His hand, his words. You are not alone. Keep my promises. You are still mine. I pressed each note to my chest, trembling, whispering his name into the silence. And though terror shivered through me, I could not resist. Because the words were not echoes of memory. They were new, fresh. They lived in the present moment. One night I woke to the sound of my window creaking open. The air turned sharp, damp, with mist. I did not move. I could not. My body locked in that fragile place between terror and yearning. And then, softly, a rose settled against my lips. Not by my hand, not by any mortal means. But there it was, brushing my mouth as though carried by invisible fingers. Do you know what it is to kiss something that should not exist? To feel petals on your lips but imagine a mouth behind them? I nearly wept, not from fear, but from the agonizing sweetness of it. I tell you this not to convince you of my sanity. Perhaps you already think me lost, but if you've ever woken with the scent of someone long buried still clinging to your skin, then you know. You know it is not madness. It is devotion that refuses to rot. The roses multiplied. My rooms became a shrine of them, glasses filled with water, vases crowding every surface, petals strewn across the floor like offerings to a god I couldn't name. And still, none withered. Each bloom remained as vivid as the night it was delivered, each one a token of love or possession. Sometimes I asked aloud, into the shadows, "Why do you do this? What do you want from me?" The silence would stretch, heavy and aching. And then a whisper, not from any throat I could see, but carried like breath along the back of my neck. You know. And I did know. He wanted me to remember, to feel him in every corner of my world, to never escape. By then, I had stopped trying to banish the fear. I dressed it in longing instead. Each night I lay down wondering where the next rose would appear, half praying I would wake to one pressed against my heart. I knew it was wrong. I knew it was unnatural. But love, real love, has never been natural. It has always been a haunting. So I waited, and the longer I waited, the deeper his presence dug into me. Until waiting itself became my way of loving him. If you're still reading, still listening to this, you may think me cursed. But tell me honestly, if roses from the grave found their way to you, would you throw them aside? Or would you cradle them, as I did, trembling, desperate, terrified, and hopelessly unwilling to let go? It began with whispers. At first I thought they were dreams, echoes conjured by memory, fragments of his voice lingering where my mind refused to let go. But dreams fade when the morning comes. These did not. They followed me into waking hours, curling against my ear like smoke, soft and insistent. The first time, I woke in the middle of the night, the house utterly silent. My breath fogged in the chill, though the hearth still burned faintly downstairs. And then, just at the edge of hearing, a murmur. My name, spoken in a voice I knew better than my own heartbeat. "Anna." I froze, heart pounding. I whispered back, yes, like a fool I did, because what else could I do? Silence is unbearable when you've been called. "Is it you?" I asked. And then it came. Not a dream, not a memory, but a reply. "You're mine still. You'll always be mine." The words seeped into me like wine poured into an empty glass. I should have screamed. I should have prayed. Instead, I pressed my palms to my face and wept with relief. Because he was with me. Somehow, impossibly, he was still with me. The whispers grew bolder with each night. Sometimes I woke to the press of something unseen against my skin, a hand ghosting over my collarbone, lips brushing the curve of my ear, the weight of a body settling beside me in the bed. There was no one there, and yet the mattress dipped, the air stirred, and my body knew him as surely as if he had never left. Do you know what it is to be kissed by absence? It is agony. It is bliss. It is both at once. One night, his voice came, more clearly than ever, every syllable thick with longing. "I promised you forever." "I remember," I whispered, clutching the sheets to keep myself anchored. "I've never stopped remembering." "Then don't be afraid. I am close, closer than you know." The whispers filled me with warmth, but there was always something else beneath them, something sharp and warning, like a thorn pressed into the flesh of a bloom. "Don't open the window when I knock." Those words sent a shiver through me. My lips trembled with the question I did not dare ask. Why? But the silence that followed was heavy, final. After that night, I began to hear him in other places too. The hush of the stairwell, the creak of the floorboards. When I stood by the mirror, his voice sometimes slid from my own reflection, soft as breath against the glass. "You're more beautiful in mourning than in life." I should have hated him for that, but instead I flushed, my chest tightening with the ache of being seen so completely. And yet the fear grew with the love. It was a dual hunger. I longed to feel him more, to hear his voice without the veil of distance, but the warnings haunted me. "Don't open the window when I knock." I waited anyway, listening for it, aching for the sound. Each creak of wood, each sigh of wind rattling the panes made my blood race. Some nights, I thought I heard it. A soft tapping at the glass, a rhythm too deliberate to be accident. I would sit upright, holding my breath, torn between terror and ecstasy. My body burned to rush across the room, to fling open the shutters and let him in. But my heart, oh, my treacherous heart, remembered his words. And so I sat, trembling in the dark, neither daring to move nor daring to ignore him. The roses continued to come, scattered across my pillow, drifting onto the floor like drops of crimson rain. Sometimes, I swore they carried his warmth. Sometimes, I swore I heard his laughter threaded through the night air. But more often, it was his whispers. Words that soothed, words that scarred. "I'll never leave you again. You don't belong to the living anymore. Not long now." Tell me if you had heard his voice. If you had felt his hand glide across your skin though he had been dead for months, would you have resisted? Or would you, as I did, surrender to the madness of believing love can tether a soul past death? I can feel your judgment through the page. I know what you're thinking. She has lost her mind. But perhaps you've never been chosen. Perhaps you've never known a love so consuming that even death cannot silence it. If you have, then you'll understand why I don't sleep easily anymore. Why I lie awake, waiting for the next whisper, the next phantom kiss, the next knock on the glass. Because one night I will answer. I know this. The hunger is too strong, the loneliness too vast. And though he tells me not to open the window, though he warns me against it, I know that one night, trembling and desperate, I will, and when I do, I will no longer be writing to you. It was not until the 13th rose that I began to understand. Until then, I had thought them tokens of devotion, proof that love could cross the grave and bloom anew. I welcomed them with trembling joy, placing each one carefully in its own glass as though I were building a shrine without realizing it. But when the 13th came, things shifted. The air grew heavy in the house, thick with fragrance, cloying, almost suffocating. The roses no longer seemed innocent. They were too vivid, too alive, their crimson too dark, almost bruised. That night, his voice came stronger than ever. It seemed to rise not only from the shadows but from the roses themselves, as though each petal had become a mouth. "You've kept them all?" he whispered. "Good. Every rose brings me closer." My heart stuttered. I asked what he meant, though I already sensed the answer deep in my bones. Each one thins the veil. Each one is a key. When the last comes, the door will open. You and I will be bound forever. A chill swept through me, though my body burned with longing. Bound forever. Wasn't that what I wanted? Hadn't I prayed for it as I clutched those impossible blooms against my chest? Yet the way he said it, with that edge of hunger, of triumph, made my breath falter. I whispered back, "And if I refuse? If I turn them away?" A silence. Then, his voice like velvet torn by thorns. "You won't." He was right. I couldn't. Because by then, I had already surrendered. Every rose I kept was proof of my choice. I could not undo it. I didn't want to. Still, dread twined with desire, as inseparable as shadow from flame. I thought of the 13th rose, pulsing on the table as if veins ran beneath its petals. I thought of the door he spoke of, thin now, thinner with each offering. A door between life and death, flesh and spirit, fear and devotion. The forbidden door. That was when I realized the roses weren't simply gifts. They were rituals. Each one was part of a binding, a weaving of threads between us. And with every rose, my soul grew less my own. I tested it once. I tried to throw a rose away. I took the 9th bloom, still fresh as the day it came, and hurled it into the fire. But the flame did not consume it. It blackened at the edges, twisted, and then, horribly, it screamed. A thin, keening sound like breath escaping a throat. I snatched it out with trembling hands, pressing it to my chest, weeping apologies to no one, to him. By morning, the petals were whole again. I never tried to destroy them after that, and so I lived with my shrine of roses, their fragrance saturating the air, their colors deepening until the house itself seemed drenched in blood. I should have fled. I should have sought a priest, a healer, anyone. But instead, I sat in the candlelight, caressing the blooms, listening for his whispers. He told me things then, secrets that tasted like iron. He said his family had always known of the door, that it had claimed generations before him. He said love had given him the strength to cross where others had failed. And he said I had a choice, to close the door, to let him fade, or to take the final rose and open it forever. And then his voice lowered, intimate, desperate. "Don't deny me, Anna. Don't deny us. You are mine, and I am yours. Do you not long to feel me whole again, to never wake alone?" The truth is, yes, I longed. God help me, I longed for it more than anything. But in the quiet after his voice faded, I asked myself the question that gnawed at me. What does it mean to bind forever? What will remain of me once I am his completely? I am not naive. I know bargains with the dead are never kind, but love is not kind either. Love is ruthless. It devours, it remakes, it enslaves. And if his love has followed me beyond the grave, then perhaps it was always meant to consume me. Would you take the last rose? Would you let him in, knowing you would never again belong to yourself? I ask you this because I already know my answer. And though I tremble as I write, though fear gnaws at me like a worm in the marrow, I cannot bring myself to refuse him, because the door is opening. I feel it in the air, in the way the candles gutter when his shadow passes, in the way the roses tilt toward me as though listening. The final rose will come soon. I can feel its approach, like the hush before a storm. And when it does, I will not turn away. It came on a night swollen with thunder. I had been waiting. God help me, I had been waiting for weeks, my heart rattling in its cage with each passing day, my body attuned to the air the way a sailor feels the shift of the sea before a storm. I knew the last rose would come. I felt it in my bones, in the restless silence of the house, in the way the roses that already filled every corner seemed to bow their heads in reverence to something greater that approached. When it arrived, I almost did not see it at first. My eyes were blurred with tears. I hadn't realized I was crying. But there it was, lying across the sill of the open window, as though placed by unseen hands mere moments before. The rose was darker than any that had come before it, so dark it seemed almost black. Though when I leaned closer, I saw the petals, trembled with a red so deep it was like blood congealed, rich and thick. And upon those petals, dew. Or not dew, but droplets shining like tears. The final rose. My breath caught, and I pressed a hand to my chest as though to keep my heart from leaping free. I had wanted this, hadn't I? I had longed for it more than life itself. And yet, standing there, I found myself paralyzed, torn between terror and rapture. I reached out. My hand shook as I touched it, and for a moment I thought the stem pulsed in my grasp, like something alive. My fingers curled around it, thorns biting into my skin, though no blood welled from the wounds. It was as if the rose drank it before it could surface. And then his voice. "You've taken it." The sound filled the room, not whispering this. Time, but full, resonant, curling around me like smoke. My knees buckled, and I sank onto the window seat, clutching the rose against my chest as though it were him. "I don't know if I can," I whispered, tears streaking down my cheeks. "I don't know if I'm strong enough." The air shivered. The candle flames bent toward me, flickering violently. "You are mine, Anna. You've always been mine. Fear is only the veil tearing. Love is the hand pulling it aside." I thought of his last words before he died. "Our love will not end with me." I thought of every rose, every whisper, every phantom touch. I thought of the nights I had curled into the hollow of the bed, clutching nothing but memory, aching for warmth that never came. And in that moment, loneliness outweighed fear. I rose to my feet. The window gaped wide before me, rain pelting against the frame, wind screaming like a chorus of mourners. I gripped the sill with one hand, the rose with the other, my breath shallow, ragged. "I'm afraid," I admitted into the storm. "So am I," he murmured back, so close I could feel his breath stir my hair. "But love was never meant to. Be safe. Open it, Anna. Open the way." My hand trembled. I thought of his warning. So long ago, don't open the window when I knock. And yet, wasn't this the very moment he had been leading me toward? Wasn't this the fulfillment of every vow, every promise? Thunder shattered overhead. The rose burned hot in my hand, the petals pressing against my skin like mouths desperate to taste. I pushed the window wider. For a moment, the world held still. Then, from the darkness beyond, a shadow unfolded. It was taller than memory, broader, its edges blurred as though stitched from storm and sorrow. Yet when it moved, I knew him. My heart knew him. He stepped across the threshold. The air went ice cold, every candle extinguished at once, leaving me in darkness broken only by the outline of his form. My body seized with terror, every instinct screaming to flee. But then, his touch. Fingers slid along my cheek, colder than winter, yet burning with a heat that seared straight into my marrow. I gasped, collapsing into the contact, half in agony, half in ecstasy. "Mine," he whispered, and the word rang, like a vow and a sentence both. Forever. I wanted to say his name, to cling to him, to drown in him. But my tongue faltered, my throat tightened. His arms closed around me, heavy, suffocating, intoxicating. I could feel the rhythm of something, not quite a heartbeat thudding against my chest, a pulse that seemed to echo with my own. And then the roses stirred. Every bloom in the room quivered, petals tearing free, swirling into the air like crimson snow. They whirled around us, cutting against my skin, soft and sharp, until the floor was slick with them. The house shuddered, the windows rattled, the storm roared louder, and through it all his embrace grew stronger. I tried to breathe. I could not. I tried to scream. I did not want to, because in that suffocating moment I knew the truth. I was his, entirely, irrevocably. Whatever door the roses had opened, I had stepped through it willingly. And yet, as his lips pressed against mine, cold, burning, endless, I felt a terror deeper than death itself. What had I done? Was this salvation or damnation? Perhaps they are the same. If you're still listening, if you're still reading this confession, know this: love has teeth, and when it promises forever, it means to devour. I have let him in, and now there is no going back. I am not certain how much of me remains. Even now, as I write these final words, my hand trembles. Not from fear, but from something else. Something inside me that is no longer mine alone. The letters slant in unfamiliar ways, as though his hand guides mine, shaping my confession with strokes of shadow. Perhaps this is fitting. Perhaps it is not truly my story anymore, but ours. I promised myself I would tell the truth, at least once, before I vanish completely. You deserve to know what became of me. Or perhaps I only want someone, anyone, to understand why I chose what I did. If you followed me this far, you must feel it already, that ache for someone who is gone, that hunger that chews holes through your soul. Loneliness makes monsters of us all. I let him in, and now he dwells within me. There are nights when I still catch sight of my reflection, pale and thin, lips bruised from kisses that never warm, eyes clouded with shadows that flicker when I blink. And when I look too long, I see him there, staring back, his smile through my mouth, his gaze behind my eyes. Sometimes when I speak, I hear both voices at once, layered like two notes pressed into a single chord. Do not mistake me, I am not unhappy. I am terrified, yes, I am consumed, but I am also no longer alone. He holds me always, in ways the living never could. His touch is inside my very bones, threading through my veins, curling around my heart. It is a curse, but it is also a kind of salvation. You may wonder if I regret it. If I could turn back, if I would throw the rose away, bar the window, silence the whispers. But the truth is, I would not. Loneliness was a deeper grave than death itself. I chose love, even in its darkest form. Perhaps that makes me weak. Perhaps it makes me damned. But I would choose it again. Still, I cannot escape the knowledge that love such as this does not rest quietly. It spreads. It waits. It hunts. He is with me now, yes, but his hunger is not satisfied. And love, once it breaks its boundaries, does not stop at a single heart. That is why I write this. Not to beg forgiveness, not to seek pity, but to warn you. Because sometimes, late at night, when the candles burn low, I feel the roses stirring again. Petals brushing against the floorboards, buds blooming in the corners where no light falls. He whispers to me that others are waiting, others who ache as I did. That love this strong should never be kept to one pair of souls alone. And if you've listened, if you've read this far, then perhaps you were meant to be next. Do you feel it already? That tug in your chest, that sudden ache you cannot name, that whisper curling behind your thoughts as though it has always been there. Do not lie to yourself. You know it. If a rose ever finds you on your windowsill at dawn, across your pillow at night, resting cold against your hand when no one could have left it there, remember my words. Do not touch it. Do not breathe its scent. Do not press it to your chest, no matter how sweet it seems, unless you are ready to never be alone again. Because once you take it, you will belong to him too, forever.